Old-school RuneScape's 3 raids can reward the daring adventurers who survive them with great riches and glory, yet their own histories are anything but glorious. The chains of events that led to their existence are dark tapestries, drenched in the blood and suffering of the countless innocents whose lives were trampled, despoiled, or sacrificed on the altars of ambition of entities who would stand on the ruins of the entire world if it helped them reach their goals. Come with me on this journey as we explore the dreadful and depressing, but largely underappreciated stories of the famous Chambers of Xeric, Theater of Blood, and Tombs of Amascut, and unveil the monumental implications of their unfinished tales. A little over 1,000 years ago, Great Korund was ruled by King Shazian VII. He held an extreme interest in the Dark Altar's powers, and this obsession led him to perform experiments on his own citizens in the Tower of Magic that were often violent and cruel, which unsurprisingly made him very unpopular in the kingdom. At one point during his rule, the king wished to expand Great Korund's borders. To scout out the surrounding areas, an expedition was sent to the Kebos lowlands. Its primary focus was the exploration of Mount Quidda Mortem. The team never returned, and the expedition was officially regarded as a failure. Yet, unbeknownst to all but a few, the mission had resulted in the discovery of an unknown species of lizards, which the king believed held great potential as test subjects for his dark experiments. He had a cave secretly built on the western side of the mountain, where there was little risk of being discovered. There, an altar was built that acted like a signal booster for the Dark Altar's power, allowing it to be channeled far away from our chaos. Shazian VII's experiments, empowered by the unstable altar, led to the creation of the Lizardmen. They pleased their creator so much that he began making arrangements to have them mass-produced in secret. Only the king's most trusted men would have been in the know about this secret, and many believed that this was the trigger for what followed. Let me explain. The previous ruler of Great Korund had been King Hosidius V. During his time on the throne, he created an elite military unit only composed of the realm's strongest and most loyal fighters, the Elder Warriors. Ironically enough, considering what happens later, King Shazian VII, back then Lord Rickard Shazian, lobbied fervently for their formation and is credited as the reason they were created by King Hosidius V. Now fast forward to where we left off a moment ago. The Elder Warriors, possibly after having been made aware of the Lizardmen's creation and being deeply troubled by their liege's behavior, carried out a coup d'etat to dethrone Shazian VII, although it should be noted that he had always had a very poor reputation among his subjects, so perhaps the timing was merely coincidental. Whatever the case, the operation was successful. The king was ambushed and killed. Curiously, his body was never recovered after the battle. But then, mere days later, a mysterious being appeared in Korund, a mage whose power was beyond what anyone had ever seen in the kingdom. He quickly began usurping the realm, referring to himself as King Xeric, and defeating all those who opposed him. Some noted his resemblance to King Shazian VII, and indeed today it is widely believed that the ousted king's body was carried away and resuscitated by his loyal followers or lizardmen, transferring his own spirit into a more magically potent incorporeal body after having learned the secret of immortality from the Tazakal, similar to how Lord Troban Archaeos would later discover and share it with the citizens of Archaeos. It wasn't long before Xeric had subordinated all of Korund and claimed its throne for himself, murdering the heads of all 5 houses to snuff out any hopes of a large, coordinated resistance. Before long, it was noted that humanoid lizards had begun acting as both his soldiers and spies, bolstering the ranks of his followers, and all but confirming that his rule would be imposed with an iron fist. The next 100 years of Korund's history were mired in tyranny, oppression, and violence. This period is aptly known as the Age of Strife. But even the worst nightmares come to an end. A century later, after every man who had personally witnessed the Mad King's arrival had passed away, Xeric's luck would run out. There was in the kingdom a common man called Bern. We don't know much about his past, but he likely originated from Hosidius, since he was a farmer. One day, while Bern was working in the field, he saw a child getting murdered by a lizardman guard. The event ignited a fire inside of him. Whatever it took, life could not be allowed to continue like this. Bern attacked the lizardman, and as the townspeople began gathering around the murder scene, they saw him eliminate the stronger and bigger opponent, a lizardman, one of the very symbols of their lifelong oppression. Bern addressed the crowd, urging them to unite and rise up against the tyranny of Xeric, and the flame of resistance spread like wildfire. Within days, Bern was at the head of a massive uprising on a scale never seen in Gillenor's history, leading a revolt that hunted down Xerican forces in every city of the realm. In the north, the rebels successfully destroyed the huge Dark Altar temple, greatly reducing Xeric's power. After only 7 days of fighting, the tyrant's armies were in tatters, and its remnants had been pushed back west beyond the Mulch River into the Kebos lowlands. The weakened mage and his remaining servants traveled to Mount Quidamorden, which their master was already familiar with. His loyal artisan, Tekton, started building a large underground base worthy of his liege's power and ambitions. And thus, while Bern was being crowned the new king of Great Corinth, in the west was beginning the creation of the Chambers of Xeric. Xeric fostered a religious-like cult of personality among his followers. At the top of its hierarchy was a position personally handpicked by him, the High Priest. At the time of his exile, the title was held by one Vasa Nistirio, his powerful and trusted advisor. He had been a magical prodigy from a young age and was known as an incredibly gifted sorcerer. Early in the chamber's excavation, strange crystals were discovered within the mountain. Vasa personally investigated them, quickly realizing they may have held the kind of magical abilities that Xeric sought from his experiments. So fascinated was he by the crystal's properties that one day, while he was deeply focused on studying one, a portion of the roof collapsed right above him. He was crushed by the giant rocks, and the sudden distraction shattered his concentration, dissipating the spell that bound his soul to his incorporeal body. His untethered essence interacted with the rocks and magic crystals within, fusing them together and giving him a new form. He could feel the rocks and shards reacting to his essence, and he quickly learned to control this new body and the potent magic it contained. Through this accident, he had unwittingly managed to wield the cave's powers for himself. He returned to Xeric's other followers with this new form, but they were terrified of him. But it seems the events of the day had warped his mind. He thought they ought to be scared, for he had the power to destroy them at a whim. A thought came to him. He was Xeric's high priest. In this form, however, he was no priest. He was a god. And if Xeric could not recognize him as his better, he had no use for him. Xeric did not entertain this idea, however, and the two sorcerers fought. But even in his new form, Vasa was unable to best Xeric. As punishment, a curse was put on the former high priest. 4 of the crystals he loved so much were put in a room, and he was bound to them, making him unable to leave the room and turning him into an unwilling guardian of the chambers. He is fated to remain in this room until either he gets killed or until enough centuries pass that Mount Quidamorden crumbles around him and his essence is finally scattered like ashes in the wind. Tekton was undeniably one of Xeric's most loyal servants. He is said to have always been an unusually strong man and had a gift for constructing incredible buildings. It's unknown when he began serving Xeric, but during his rule he erected many grand temples dedicated to the worship of his master. He must have also been a skillful magic user, as it is said he built clever buildings with magic in the walls. When Xeric was exiled, Tekton followed him to Mount Quidamortum. He quickly realized the power contained within the mountain's crystals, and it appears he was the only one to fully understand how they functioned. He built a temple at the top of the mountain that allowed the crystal's power to be focused and utilized with ease, quote, without needing to be as clever as Tekton. Xeric was pleased with the newfound strength the temple gave him. Tekton excavated and built the chambers, wishing to fulfill his master's desire to extract more crystals and have specialized rooms where he could perform experiments. Eventually, Xeric's satisfaction with the temple soured, as many of his servants began harnessing the crystal's power for themselves. Vasa's betrayal after assuming his new form may have been the straw that broke the lizardman's back, but in any case, Xeric one day had had enough of his followers usurping the mountain's power and told Tekton to destroy the temple. Tekton obeyed, but left it mostly intact so that it could be fixed later, were his master to change his mind. With the temple disabled, Tekton tried to teach Xeric how to tap into the crystal's magic himself, without an external catalyst, but Xeric was unable to wield the cave's power like Tekton did. The latter theorized his master did not understand the crystals to the same extent he did. Xeric was displeased by these developments, and likely saw Tekton's mastery over the crystals with bitterness and deep suspicion. One day, Xeric told Tekton he was going to be rewarded for his years of loyal service and promised him immortality. He made him a new body built out of cave rocks and metal and had Tekton's soul transferred into it. Tekton's old body was destroyed, but of course he was not worried. He had a brand new one that was superior. Xeric brought Tekton to his anvil. He cast an enchantment on it and taught his follower how he could use it to repair any damage done to his new body, effectively making him immortal, but only as long as he could use the anvil to rejuvenate himself. Tekton marveled at the incredible strength of his new form and how it was almost completely impervious to ranged and magic attacks. However, it soon became evident that there were flaws with his soul's new shell. His mind was rapidly degrading. The other Xericans began calling him stupid, and his memory was steadily unraveling. Soon enough, he forgot how the crystal's magic worked. He forgot his past. He retained vague memories of a spouse and children back in Corinth, but could not remember why they were important, or even if they were real. But as always, Tekton was not worried, for he was convinced that if his master had given him this body, it was surely for the best. Xeric's followers eventually stopped talking to Tekton entirely, and with his mind and memory being so damaged, he himself stopped leaving his anvil, deeming it too dangerous to wander away from the source of his immortality. He decided to dedicate all of his time to the improvement and strengthening of his body, until such a time when his master returned and required his service again. I believe Xeric likely saw Tekton as a threat, since he was the only one able to wield the cave magic after the temple was disabled, and purposely gave him a body that would chip away at his mind, keeping his strong body intact should he need his strength, all the while ensuring he would never be in a position to oppose him like Vasa had. One can argue Tekton might have been the only individual Xeric truly feared, but the artisan's unwavering loyalty to his master blinded him to the possibility of being himself betrayed. In my opinion, Tekton is one of Xeric's most tragic victims. One of the greatest minds of his time, who could have accomplished incredible things for humanity, was instead left to decay in a body designed to turn him into a mindless slave, all because of his misplaced loyalty. As for the spouse and children that remain only as shreds of memories in Tekton's mind, we don't know their identity or what fate they ultimately met after Xeric's exile from Corinth. At some point over the course of his experiments, Xeric is said to have felt, quote, a disruption in the fabric of reality. It was well known that the Dark Altar could act as a link between planes of existence, because that's how the runic altars in Archaeus work. The Dark Altar creates a connection between them and the real blood and soul altars. Yet, Xeric's followers were still surprised that this power was found in Mount Quidamortum as well. Xeric wanted to tap into this possible source of power. It was no easy task, but he managed to increase the intensity of the disruption, so much so, in fact, that it created a portal, allowing those present to gaze into another unknown world. An unnamed disciple of Xeric recorded the events and gave a visceral description of this otherworldly dimension. We glimpsed into a strange, red-hued world where monstrous creatures lurched through the tendrils of a landscape that looked and smelled like the intestines of a rotting corpse. An unbelievably large wasp-like entity started attempting to squeeze through the portal. Those in the room tried to drive it back with magic, but it was evident the creature was resistant to their spells. Xeric called for an immediate retreat, leaving only some weaker followers behind to distract the monster's attention, while the rest sealed the chamber's entrance. Despite the incident caused by the experiment, Xeric and his subjects were optimistic that such portals could potentially be used either to summon armies from other realms or travel to locations of interest, and at least one attempt was made to organize a fight against Vespula. However, considering she is still there and the portal is still open when players stumble into her chamber, it was clearly unsuccessful. The Vanguard were a trio of some of the highest-ranking officers in Xeric's army when he ruled over Corinth. Back then, the Mad King's commanders had carte blanche to use any means they deemed necessary when questioning suspected rebels and traitors. The Vanguard were notorious for their brutal interrogations and unwavering loyalty to their monarch. Each Vanguard was an expert in a specific combat style, and there were rumors that they were undefeatable when combining their strengths. Due to their exemplary performance and unmatched battlefield prowess, Xeric put them in charge of his entire army. Many theorized that Byrne's revolt, which overthrew Xeric, could have been crushed. But when the Vanguard caught wind that a major uprising was in progress, they fled Corinth, leaving the dictator's armies leaderless and unable to quickly coordinate a response. A furious Xeric cursed them, vowing to make their existence so terrible that they would wish they had stood by him and died in the rebellion instead. Much later, after Xeric's power had already been enhanced by his experiments with the mountain's crystals, his sentries spotted unknown movement on Mount Quidamortem. The intruders turned out to be none other than the Vanguard, who had come to renew their service under their old master. They admitted their cowardice back in Corinth and said that if they were allowed to serve under him once more, they would never disappoint again. To all of his followers' surprise, Xeric warmly accepted their offer and treated them with the utmost courtesy and respect. They were granted fine clothes, mighty feasts, and the rare honor of being allowed to stand near their master, making many Xericans bitter. The Vanguard were invited into the chambers so that they may increase their power through the mountain's crystals, something even some of Xeric's closest servants had yet to be blessed with. They braced themselves, ready to receive the boon, but Xeric was never one for forgiveness. He finally enacted the promise he made when the Vanguard betrayed him. Their bodies were boiled and mangled by their lord's magic, amplified by the room they were in. The process was so quick, they barely had time to scream before their twisted forms no longer allowed for it. Then they began rising again, but as whole new shapes. The entire scene was later recorded by the only witness, a high-ranking servant that Xeric had asked to tag along. In their recollection of the event, they described the Vanguard standing before Xeric in their new bodies, their souls having clearly been destroyed by whatever incantation was cast on them. Nevertheless, perhaps as closure to his own vengeance, or perhaps as a message to his follower and those who would read his account of that day, he gave the Vanguard a short speech. "You failed me. You crawled away from my service to save your skins. Know, now, that I do not forgive such failure. I do not forget such failure. Had you fled to the ends of the world, my vengeance would have pursued you. Had you taken your own sorry lives to escape my wrath, even beyond the gates of death, my revenge would have come upon you. Instead, you came to grovel at my feet, sniveling and begging to be taken back. Your apology is not accepted. Now you can serve me in your new forms. In life you stood united, and you betrayed me. Now I grant you an unlife, standing united as before, but bound to the crystals of my caverns so you cannot fail me again. Guard my chambers, protect my secrets until the end of time. Xeric left the room with his follower, who he tasked with the recording of what had transpired. This book, titled Vanguard Judgment, or alternatively Judgment of the Vanguard, was meant to teach all of those who would betray Quidamorden's Dark Lord what kind of fate awaited them. Xeric had originally come to Mount Quidamordem with a creature keeper who, among other things, tried domesticating the scavenger beasts in the caves, but ended up accidentally succumbing to a lizardman shaman's poison. As Xeric's experiments called for someone skilled in handling animals, a hound master was hired. They were at first skeptical of both the job and the location, but the pay was very high, and their greed led them to accept the offer. The job was initially to take care of a few hounds that Xeric wanted to experiment on. The Hound Master liked the creatures, but dared not say or do anything against his employer, for he had heard rumors of what happened to those who opposed Xeric. One day, Xeric came to the Hound Master and told him that one of his experiments had been a success. He had gone deeper into the chambers with a large female hound, the mightiest beast of the entire pack. When they came back from this purportedly successful experiment, the Hound Master described her as a twisted, scaly abomination. From that point on, it seems the Hound Master's main task was keeping the mutated hound alive. Although while they used to like each other's company, the creature did not appear to remember who her trainer was anymore. Unbeknownst to both Xeric and the Hound Master, the dog was newly pregnant when she was experimented on, which caused her offspring to also be born a mutated monstrosity. Keeping both of them fed became a challenge that could only be accomplished by constantly growing the meat tree, which seems to have been a byproduct of a previous failed experiment. Eventually, Xeric was absent for months, but the Hound Master never dared leave his post. Despite the guilt he felt over his work in the chambers and the grinding daily labor of keeping the Muttadiles fed and alive, he was simply too worried about what might happen if Xeric found out he had deserted. It's unknown what became of the Hound Master, but the beast he helped create still roamed the chambers, never straying very far from the meat tree that keeps them alive. Surprisingly little is known about the Great Olm. As Xeric and his followers kept digging up more chambers, they eventually unearthed an incredible creature that they dubbed the Guardian in the Deep. Despite this creature's incredible size and might, Xeric was able to best it, proving the extent of his power. The Xericans were, however, convinced that the creature had not been slain, but was merely hiding deeper in its domain to lick its wounds and recuperate, a theory which turns out to be correct, as the Great Olm is indeed in good shape when the player reaches its lair at the end of a raid. There is one hint as to the Great Olm's origin, and it is found in another mountain, Mount Karulm. The mountain is named after Karulm, a dragonkin that came to Zaya even before Skotizo and the founders of its first cities. Karulm wanted to use this faraway, isolated location to perform experiments without restraint or risk of interruption due to the raging god wars at the time. Parts of his diary can still be found, in which he wrote that when he noticed others had moved near Mount Karulm, he deemed it too dangerous to continue his work there, referring to a mountain to the south where he may be able to relocate his activities. Karulm's experiments created the worms, drakes, and hydras found in his eponymous mountain, all of which are draconic creatures. Furthermore, the very last sentence of his old diary reads, "There's a lizard species there that may well be key to my next project." With the Great Olm having both a somewhat lizard-like appearance and a weakness to Dragonbane weaponry, there is strong evidence that he may have been the result of another one of Karulm's experiments. After Xeric and his party fought the Guardian in the Deep, it is said that Xeric moved on to new projects away from Mount Quidamortem, seeking greater ambitions than mere control over Corund. However, before the chambers were abandoned, all of the powerful experimental weapons developed by Xeric and his servants were stored at the end of the Great Olm's chamber, where they would be guarded by this gigantic beast as well as the other sinister dangers scattered throughout the rest of the chambers. Unfortunately, there is little information to be found on the items themselves, although it makes sense for the raid's only armor set reward to be magic-themed, since Xeric himself was a phenomenal wizard obsessed with increasing his own power. Curiously, there is next to no evidence of a religion or worship of any deity on Corund around Xeric's time, yet the prayer scrolls obtainable as potential rewards are stated to be archaic invocations of the gods, which I thought was interesting. Perhaps Xeric had no qualms about bowing to divine beings as long as they could help further his own goals. But this is merely me speculating. Let's go back in time to the early Third Age. The infamous God Wars are in full swing after the fall of the Empty Lord just a few decades ago, and Zamorak, formerly a Majorat, has already returned to Gielinor after his ascension to godhood. Many of those who joined his uprising against Zaros did so after being promised lands and titles in Zamorak's new realm, carved out of the kingdoms of their enemies. One such Zarosian trader had been Lowerniel Draken, lord of the otherworldly plane of Vampirium. Unlike many of Zamorak's allies, his power lay not only in his own strength, but also in that of the massive armies he could muster. As leader of Vampirium, he was able to raise countless legions of vampires and werewolves to serve under his orders. Why wait for your liege to grant you land when you can take it yourself? Lowerniel Draken chose a prized but ambitious target for his conquest, the Kingdom of Hallowvale, a mighty realm at the easternmost point of the mainland where lived Iciens, a species of tall and browny followers of Saradomin. There was also a large human population, although they had been forever treated as second-class citizens. They were ruled by Queen Efarite Hallow, whose dynasty gave its name to the kingdom. The invasion was tough, as the Iciens' strength and their affinity to light, which was a natural weakness of Lowerniel Draken's troops, allowed them to put up quite a fight. Unfortunately for both sides, Vampirium's Dark Lord had no qualms about sending thousands upon thousands of his troops to the meat grinder if it got him even an inch closer to his goals. Under the ceaseless battering of the enemy armies, the defense of Hallowvale began to falter. Even the combined powers of the Iciens and the Justiciars, Saradomin's most elite order of knights, fell short of being the unmovable object to the vampire's unstoppable force. Eventually, the remaining Hallowvale soldiers had to retreat to the southeastern corner of the kingdom, where the capital was located. They braced for a long siege that neither side had the strength to break by force, as Lowerniel's armies had suffered too many casualties due to his costly style of aggressive warfare and disregard for the lives of his subordinates. Yet this standstill did not last long, thanks to a character we will be hearing a lot about, the matriarch of the Vitur vampiric clan, Verzik Vitur. Together with Lowerniel's brother Ranis Draken, she captured an enemy justiciar and gently pressured them for information. The Saradominist knight, no doubt swayed by Verzik's silver tongue and alluring figure, revealed the existence of a secret passage in the Queen's castle that led directly outside the city. This was a golden opportunity for the besiegers. An infiltration force later gained access to Hallowvale's royal palace under the cover of night using this backdoor. They abducted the queen's human husband, King Acertes, bringing him back to the vampire's camp. The very next day, with her realm in ruins and the love of her life in the hands of the invaders, Queen Efarite threw the towel. She opened negotiations with Lower Draken, offering the surrender of what remained of Hallowvale in exchange for one simple concession: sparing her husband's life. The offer was accepted, and the glorious Saradominus stronghold of Hallowvale became the dark vampiric realm of Mauritania. Lower Niel, thereafter known as Lord Draken, began a reign of terror that would eventually lead to the complete extinction of the Icene race from his domain and the enslavement of the human population. Some of them were forced to undergo vampirification, turning them into lesser vampires to fill up Draken's dwindling ranks, a fate he also reserved for King Acertes, despite the deal he had made with Queen Efarite. The other humans were packed into the old Hallowvale capital to be used as blood supplies for the vampires. This area became the city of Mayor Ditch, where humans live in horrible conditions under the oppressive regime of Lord Draken to this very day. For her part in securing the victory over Hallowvale, Verzik Vitur was granted the Queen's castle as her personal domain and the title of Lady Verzik. Long before the events of the Mauritanian campaign, she had been known for her love of violent entertainment, which she sometimes referred to as playing with her food. She would often order those under her command to fight each other on the spot and without warning, eager for blood to be spilled. But Lady Verzik was no longer satisfied with these displays. She now ruled over her own castle and would henceforth escalate her sources of entertainment. Queen Efarite's old castle was completely renovated and a series of rooms with deadly challenges were installed. Once this new entertainment complex was finished, the citizens of Mayorditch were given an offer. If they faced Lady Verzik's challenges and survived, they would no longer be targeted for blood tithing. Her palace, now fully revamped to fit her aesthetic and entertainment wishes, was renamed to Versinhaza, and its deadly chambers became collectively known as the Theater of Blood. Although a very rare sight around the area, outsiders were allowed to participate as well, as they made for a much more entertaining sight than the under-equipped and frail citizens of Mayorditch. On the rare occasion when a party made it past all the challenges, a most delighted Lady Vitur would personally meet with them, not to reward them, mind you, but to slay them herself. The Theater of Blood would remain in a similar form for thousands of years until Lady Verzik decided quite recently its aging halls needed a worthy upgrade. She acquired a powerful entity, more on that later, and she was struck by inspiration. She had grown bored of the Theater of Blood. What it needed now for the excitement to be rekindled was more creatures and beasts like this one. Lady Verzik had it renovated once more, customizing each room to fit an assortment of powerful monsters and beings she acquired for the occasion. When the process was complete, the Theater of Blood was finally in its opulent, modern form. Shortly before the current version of the Theater of Blood was thought up by Lady Vitur, there lived in Mayorditch a human woman named Serafina. She and her younger brother were the only survivors of their family, and she spent years doing whatever she had to ensure their survival in the hopeless Mauritanian slums. This meant she often got involved in illicit trades right under the noses of the patrolling Vyers. One day, she arranged an exchange of food for weapons, a common trade in the Mayorditch underground. However, on that occasion, things did not go smoothly. Details are blurry, but her brother had to get involved, and during the dispute ended up with a very minor cut from a sword. Not long after, he was hit by a severe fever which lingered endlessly and left him barely able to stand at all some days. The blade that barely scratched him had likely been poisoned. For millennia, the city of Mayorditch had been split into several sectors, and irregular rotation of which one was designated for blood tithing ensured that the population was never too weakened for their vampiric overlords to run out of fresh blood supplies. Serafina's sector's turn was just 2 weeks away, and she very much doubted her brother could survive such a draining treatment. She needed to do something, anything, to treat her brother, and quickly. Rumors of a doctor living in another sector reached her ear, a very rare profession in the pit of despair that was Mayerditch. Armed with a modicum of hope, she searched for the man, ready to give him whatever he wanted for treating her afflicted brother. Yet once again, luck was not on her side. She would later write in her diary the following about her search. The doctor was a dead end, literally. Apparently the vampires took him to Dark Mayor a few weeks ago. He'll never be seen again. But then, as she stood neck-deep in hopelessness, fate threw her a curveball. She came home one day to a strange man awaiting her return. He wore clean, high-quality clothes, and around his neck was a chain adorned with a large, dark medallion. Serafina was no fool. No human in Mayerditch would be seen with such an attire, and she instantly knew this was a vampire in disguise. Her unexpected visitor, thoroughly unbothered by his cover being revealed, addressed Serafina by name and said he had a unique offer for her. He knew a way to save her brother and was willing to help him. How he even knew about the household's woes was a mystery, although Serafina theorized she may have been a little indiscreet when inquiring about the doctor. She was willing to do anything to protect her one and only remaining loved one, but the harsh streets of Mayerditch had taught her an important lesson. Vampires don't do charity. The stranger clearly did not want to help for humanitarian reasons. She asked him what his price was, and when she heard the answer, she felt a shiver go down her spine. She briefly debated the terms of the unorthodox deal. The vampire knew a cure for her brother's illness, and while he admitted having no guarantee of its success, he was confident it would work, at least if he could assess and confirm that her brother was compatible. For her part, Serafina would be taken to a Dark Mayor lab and volunteer as a test subject for some unclear experiments. A few days later, the disguised vampire returned. Serafina agreed to the grim deal, and her brother was assessed for compatibility. The Vyre stared at him for a long moment, which he described in his own diary as quite unnerving. After a protracted moment of silence, the stranger finally told Serafina he was compatible, before leaving the house without another word. Serafina's brother understandably demanded answers, aware that something fishy involving himself was going on. She refused to say anything at first, but after he protested, she relented and promised that soon she would explain everything. More time passed, and a mere 3 days before the sector would be tithed, the fevered man reminded his sister of her promise. She reluctantly agreed and explained that the mysterious man knew of a way to cure his affliction for good. In a few days, he would take him to a secret location where he would get an operation that would most likely save his life. Unsatisfied with the answers, he pressed for more details. How was she paying for his services? Who even was this man? As he pointed out, no citizen, doctor or otherwise, could afford to wear clothes like that. She never gave him the answers he sought. She began tearing up and simply walked away, not revealing anything else. The day of the tithing came, and Serafina was by her brother's bed. He had grown ever weaker and could now do little more than rest. The stranger was supposed to pick him up shortly. He did not want to go, as something about the deal did not sit well with him, but he simply lacked the strength to resist. Then, as he lay there bedridden, his sister believed he was asleep, but she was mistaken. She let out an ominous whisper, 2 words that filled her very much awake brother with unspeakable dread. "Forgive me." These were the last words he would ever hear from his sister. Both were taken away that day, and each underwent their own operation. The experiments performed on Serafina involved the use of Hespori bark, a rare carnivorous plant from Mauritania whose bark possesses regenerative properties. This explains the similarities between the Hespori and the Maiden of Sugadinti, the creature she was ultimately turned into after the experiments were complete. As for the disguised vampire who orchestrated this whole twisted deal, This was none other than Rhanis Draken in his human form, brother to Lowerniel Draken himself, the Dark Lord of Mauritania. Sometime later, it seems Rhanis wanted to dispose of her, presumably having no more use for her new form now that the experiments were over. Yet she instead ended up in the care of Lady Vitur, who took a liking to her, as she thought the monstrosity she had become would make for a perfect challenge in her theater of blood. She acquired her, which triggered the inspiration for the theater's latest renovations. Lady Vitur was the one who gave her the name Maiden of Sugadinti, which is interesting in itself. Sugadinti is a little-known, very mysterious entity. In the Theater of Blood's lobby is a mysterious stranger who covertly tries to help raiding parties complete the theater. He claims to work for someone working to undermine Verzik Vitur, an enigmatic master named Sugadinti. Incidentally, the mysterious stranger found in the Hallowed Sepulchre lobby is either the same person or another servant of Sugadinti. His answers are rather vague if he is asked about it. Whoever Sugadinti is, both the mysterious stranger and Lady Vitur herself find the name ironic, while Rhanis Draken thought it was interesting and unexpected. I believe and hope we will discover more about this mysterious individual when the Mauritania Quest series is expanded on. Oh, and if you're curious about the fate of Seraphina's unnamed brother, you may be surprised to learn that you and he may have run into each other before. Rhanis Draken technically upheld his side of the deal, but in the shallowest possible way. The man was indeed cured of his illness, but was turned into an abomination. A monster which is fought during the quest A Taste of Hope. The Pestilent Bloat is not so much a being in the traditional sense, but rather a monstrosity animated and put together by a strange Vyre known only as the Butcher. Whoever they are, they were tasked by Lady Vitur with the creation of a creature worthy of her new theater of blood. Luckily for us, we know the ingredients used in the creation of the Pestilent Bloat, and that is a sentence I never thought would escape my lips. The Butcher took 3 giant heads, the body of a disgruntled ogre, 4 buckets of human blood, 2 cyclop arms, 2 Catabalpon legs, and, more strangely, a sense of pride, and 1 apple pie, which in his writing is the only ingredient labeled as very important. The Butcher then proceeded to somehow sew all of these heteroclite items together and found a way to make this grotesque aberration walk and fight, a process which you couldn't possibly pay me enough to witness with my own eyes. When he went to the Verzik throne room to present Verzik Vitur with his proud creation, something peculiar happened. There was no Vyre aristocrat in the room, only an oversized Nylocas, the spider-like creatures which we'll explore in much more details very soon. The Butcher kept some notes that read like the ramblings of a madman, in which he described the scene as something he should not have seen. But if you pay close attention, you might find some rather cryptic hidden messages scattered among the barely coherent pages of his records. Combining all of the capital letters found throughout spells a short phrase: "Don't trust her." There are also 3 lines near the end that seemingly make no sense, yet if you reorganize the letters around, you will end up with 3 anagrams that are somewhere between foreboding and chilling. Seraphina was betrayed, Verzik is dead, and Nylocas will rule. But what is all this about? Why was there a sudden shift in this mad scientist of a Vyre after the encounter with a Nylocas in the throne room, to the point of concluding his own notes by saying he no longer feels safe in Verzik? Well, just stick around, and maybe you'll find out shortly. Just a quick warning here. If you are arachnophobic, I suggest you avoid looking at the video and keep this chapter audio only. Consider yourself warned. The Nylocas are an arachnid race originating from Vampirium who were known to the vampires as weak and unthreatening, as long as they were alone. However, these dreadful creatures preferred living in large clusters, which meant they could easily swarm and overwhelm unprepared foes. Verzik Vitur was interested in them long before the vampires even migrated to Gielinor in the Second Age. She kept quite the collection of domesticated specimens, which she brought with her to this world. Once settled, she began breeding them extensively, multiplying their numbers over the years. Her efforts were so successful, in fact, that today there are many more Nylocas on Gielinor than there ever were in their own homeworld. There originally existed only 3 species, the Ischyros, Toxobolos, and Hagios Nylocas. However, Verzik's love for arachnid experiments led to crossbreeding, resulting in the birth of separate species unique to Gielinor. One of these more recent species are the Nylocas Vasilias, a rare breed characterized by its large size and distinct abilities, such as limited shape-shifting that allows it to mimic other Nylocas species and their respective defensive tools. Yet, when Lady Vitur created this dreadful beast, she did not realize how much more dangerous her experiments could be. Once again, you will see what I mean soon. At some point, an unknown Vyre was given a mission by Lord Draken himself. They were to investigate the mysterious and potent Shadow Realm, a sort of mirror dimension to our own which holds great power. To help the researcher, they were granted a live dark beast specimen, as they were known to have a natural connection to the Shadow Realm, hence their common name. Although how this was achieved is unknown, the Vyre succeeded in making the dark beast connect to the Shadow Realm, and was able to establish contact with an unknown entity on the other side using telepathic intrusion. The entity appeared to be trying to speak, although their speech was mostly incoherent. Undeterred, the researcher pushed their experiments further. They altered the dark beast, infusing it with more power so that it could more easily travel to and from the Shadow Realm, strengthening the connection to the mysterious entity. While it still proved difficult to communicate with the presence, the researcher was able to extract one piece of information. It said its name was Sotetseg. While a good step forward, this discovery left the Vyre unsatisfied. Attempting to communicate through the dark beast alone was proving to be a method with severe limitations. What they needed was a way to cross to the other dimension and interrogate Sotetseg themselves, and so they refined their hold on the dark beast even more, theoretically allowing it to bring others along for the crossing to the Shadow Realm. Now in possession of the greatest opportunity to extract valuable information yet, the researcher prepared to join its modified specimen on a trip to the other side of reality. The events that followed sadly seemed to have gone unrecorded. Whatever was achieved on this scientific interdimensional journey, the only result we can attest to with confidence is that the enigmatic Sotetseg either took control or fused with the modified Dark Beast, combining their dark powers and creating the entity now found within the Theater of Blood, a mighty foe capable of going in and out of the Shadow Realm, along with their prey. Whether this was the desired outcome for anyone involved in the incident is unknown, as is the fate of the researcher who set the stage for it. If I had to speculate, my guess would be that Sotetseg took possession of the Dark Beast in order to grant itself a powerful physical form and the ability to transcend the realm it appeared to be stuck in. If that's the case, I would expect the Vyre to have been killed once Sotetseg no longer needed them. But as with all theories, take this one with a grain of salt, and feel free to share your own in the comments. In the world of Vampirium, back in ancient times before Zaros came and turned vampiric society into a more organized one, vampires were hunters at the top of the food chain. No other creature could hope to go toe-to-toe with them in an equal fight. Well, that is, none but one. the Yarasa. They were bat-like creatures with the speed, strength, and unpredictability to rival even the best vampires. As such, they were a great threat to the fledgling vampiric race. But one day, a powerful and ambitious vampire attempted to crush and subjugate all of Vampirium's vampire clans to their will. Lowerniel Vergidia Draken. One by one, he subjugated the other 7 primordial vampiric houses until their entire race was united under his rule. This newfound unity allowed them to combine their strength and conquer their only real challengers, the Yarasa. They launched a campaign of extermination, slaughtering most of them in short order. Those who managed to escape the initial strike were mercilessly hunted down until the slaughter could be extended to them too. By the time Zaros had arrived in Vampirium and convinced the vampires to travel with him to Gielinor, the ancient and once dominant Yarasa was reduced to a single living being, ensuring their race would never recover. Thousands of years later, during Gielinor's current 5th age, Lord Draken grew restless. He thought vampires had grown weak and lazy from having spent all this time creating a civilization where everything was handed to them. He cared little for the bland luxuries of Dark Mayor. He was craving a proper hunt, one that would reignite the thrills of the wild battles to the death he remembered from Vampirium's bygone age before the Great Migration. He set out for his homeworld, determined to go on a hunt that would satiate him, even if it carried the risk of death. There was only one being strong enough to satisfy this hunt: Xarpus, last king of the Yarasa and only survivor of his kind. We unfortunately don't know how the hunt itself went, only that Xarpus later showed up as one of Verzik's new challenges for her Theater of Blood. We can at least take an educated guess at what happened on Vampirium. Lord Draken found Xarpus and prevailed in the fight, then probably decided to bring back his defeated opponent and offer it to Verzik rather than kill it outright. Xarpus, the king of a species that once made even the proud and powerful primordial vampires cower in fear, is now fated to fight desperate humans for the entertainment of those who long ago wiped out his kin from existence. His tale is now that of a mighty king turned jester with neither subjects nor land to call his own anymore. Again, dear listener, if you are arachnophobic, you might want to avert your gaze for the next few minutes. Consider yourself warned once more. Much has already been said about the creator and final challenge of the Theater of Blood, Verzik Vitur. However, I hinted at some mysteries that needed answering earlier, so now is the time to explore the more haunting part of the story of Verzinhaz's mistress. During her many experiments on the Nylocas, Verzik attempted to crossbreed them with Araxites, another species of arachnid Mauritanian creatures who dwelled in a large cave complex near her domain. She succeeded in creating an offspring, a tiny purple specimen. However, the small creature bit her and almost instantly died off. The bite seemed trivial enough, and Verzik understandably classified the experiment as a failure. Yet not too long after the incident, she became mildly ill and hired the services of Vulcan Orvoros, a Vyre doctor. He was tasked with treating her in complete privacy and secrecy. During his first visit, the only noteworthy symptom he recorded was a slight fever. He prescribed some Guam potions to help her recover and scheduled a follow-up appointment a week later. When he returned to Verzinhaza, Verzik's condition had worsened, and he noted she had already gained a significant amount of weight. She blamed it on the illness preventing her from exercising, which did not satisfy the doctor's worries. He insisted on more thorough medical examinations to make sure the affliction could be kept in check. Upon his next visit, the rapid weight gain was showing no sign of slowing down, and further testing revealed something rather worrying. Tiny eggs had appeared inside Verzik's body, which seemed to have negatively affected her natural vampiric immunities, such as resistance to non-silver weaponry, although her shape-shifting abilities at least remained seemingly unaffected. Lady Vita denied the doctor's suggestion that she should go to Dark Mayor for an operation to have the eggs removed, refusing to leave Vers in Haza. Vulcan Orvoros still insisted he should quickly operate before his special patient's condition got any worse. He later returned to Vers in Haza, where he managed to successfully extract the tiny eggs from Verzik's body, which caused him great relief. He decided to keep some for future testing and let the Vita matriarch keep some for herself, as she wished for some of them to remain in her possession. The doctor scheduled a later visit and departed, optimistic about the condition's progress after the successful operation. His next visit therefore should have been routine and uneventful, yet that was not the case. Not at all, in fact. When he showed up, something terrible had clearly happened. Out of nowhere, the eggs had returned, and Verzik angrily refused his requests to remove them once more, clearly not fully in control of her own mind. The worried doctor would eventually return to Vers in Haza's ruler and witness a horrifying scene. At the height of Vita's weight gain, something nightmarish violently burst out of her. Before he knew it, he was alone in a room with a giant arachnid. He would not live long enough to make sense of what had happened that day. Vulcan Orvoros was the only live witness to an event whose implications for the future still aren't fully clear. The birth of the Nylocas Queen, a cross between the vicious Araxites and the ancient Nylocas, which had hatched from inside one of the world's most powerful being and seemingly hijacked both her mind and body. That day, the Queen decreed that the sun had set on the age of the vampires, and the rule of the Nylocas had begun. Since she killed Verzik's doctor, nobody is currently fully aware that a Nylocas masquerading as Lady Vita walks the dark halls of Vers in Haza, although the Butcher seems to have witnessed the existence of the Nylocas Queen and realized, at least in parts, what was going on. During the quest A Taste of Hope, Sugadinti, his acolyte and the player do discover what happened after studying Verzik's memory, but it remains to be seen how this twist will impact the fate of Mauritania and its inhabitants. And now for the Theatre of Blood's unique drops. Let's begin with the Avernic Defender hilt. Avernic smiths used to craft incredible weapons for the god Zaros, made from the liquid flames found in Infernus, the dimension where demons originate from. The secrets of Avernic weaponry has forever eluded those from Gielinor, hence their great rarity and value there. The Avernic Defender hilt found in Lady Verzik's vault is an artifact left over from her time serving Zaros in the Second Age, before she sided with Zamorak to overthrow the Empty Lord. Then we have the Sanguinesti staff. During the Fourth Age, Lord Draken attempted to expand westwards and conquer the burgeoning human realms settled there. After years of fighting, the attempt ultimately failed when a group of elite temple knights, remembered today as the Seven Priestly Warriors, pushed back the Mauritanians out of Silvaria and beyond the Salve River before blessing its water, severely weakening evil beings attempting a crossing. Despite the defeat, it's said Lady Verzik again proved herself to be a most valuable ally of Lord Draken, and so he rewarded her with the Sanguinesti staff, a valuable weapon he had crafted himself. It is named after the Sanguinesti region, which refers to the area inside the Vire Wall, including both Mayor Ditch and Dark Mayor. Next is the Grazi Rapier. Among Mauritania's aristocracy, there are 8 vampire houses that can trace their ancestry all the way back to the days when their race lived in Vampirium, before the migration to Gielinor. Each house prided itself on its unique traits, and none were prouder of their combat strength than the Grazi clan, infamous for its tendency to bait and goad others into fighting them and only hunting the strongest and most terrible beasts. One day, a mighty Grazi warlord got into a fight with another noble vampire. The fight itself went unrecorded, but the outcome is not in doubt. The Grazi warrior was killed, and his trusty rapier claimed by the victor, who was none other than the father of Verzik Vitur. He gave her the weapon at some point, and it is still part of her prized collection of great artifacts. Now, the Justiciar armor. As mentioned earlier, the Justiciars were Saradomin's most trusted and powerful warriors during the days of the God Wars, each of them handpicked by the deity himself. After Hallowvale's defeat, most, if not all, Justiciars had either renounced their allegiance to Saradomin or fallen on the battlefield. The pieces of Justiciar armor in Verzik's vault were looted from the corpses of her enemies and added to her collection as mementos of the invasion. And finally, the legendary Scythe of Vitur. While the name of House Vitur's founder is unknown, the ancient being was, and still is, worshipped as a god by his descendants, and even some other races from Vampirium. He was known to wield a vicious-looking scythe, which was presumably passed down among his clan from generation to generation, and is now undoubtedly one of the jewels in Lady Vitur's prized collection. Have you ever asked yourself who is Amaskut and why are there so many powerful beings in her tombs? Probably not. But if you did, you were asking it wrong, because these are not actually the tombs of Amaskut, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start from the beginning. You've no doubt heard of Gilinor's main gods, Guthix, Zamorak, and Saradomin. You're probably even familiar with ancient ones like Zaros and Armadil. However, this is a cultural bias of sorts, for while our own history is tied to these deities, this is not the case everywhere. Down south, the children of the Caridian desert were guided for millennia by different beings, collectively known as the Menethite pantheon. It's believed that its first two gods, Tumekin and Elidinis, respectively gods of the sun and of fertility and growth, arrived on Gilinor sometime during the Second Age. As the two deities having settled in the Caridian Peninsula, they decided to get married and had two children, Icthlorin, guardian of the dead, and his sister Amaskut, goddess of rebirth, which I've been mispronouncing Amaskut my whole life, but apparently it's Amaskut. So there you go. This family became the four main gods of the pantheon, although it was clear that Tumekin and Elidinis were much more powerful than their offspring, a fact that will become important later, but for this reason, Icthlorin and Amaskut are considered demigods. Tumekin also created four avatars that became minor deities of the Menethite pantheon: the baboon-headed Apmekin, goddess of companionship; the crocodile-headed Krondis, goddess of modesty and resourcefulness; Het, god of physical and mental health, who refreshingly has a normal human head; and the scarab-headed god of wisdom and isolation, Scabaras. The Second Age is sometimes known as the Golden Age of Zaros, as he quickly expanded his realm into the mightiest empire in history. His domain shared a border with the Caridian lands, and the Menephites inhabiting them were not particularly happy to have a northern neighbor with aggressive expansionist ideas. In fact, the Zarosians became known to the Menephites as the Ruinous Powers. Conflict eventually broke out between the realms, known today as the Caridian-Zarosian War. The Menephites knew from the start this would be no easy fight, and so their gods granted them weapons of incredible power to overcome the northern threat. Despite this divine boon, it wasn't long before the endless Zarosian tide began pushing them back, its momentum seemingly unstoppable. Icthlorin and Amaskut departed from the world they had been born into to visit other dimensions in search of assistance. During this quest, they stumbled upon Threniske, a plane of existence veiled in enigma. One of the few things known about it is that a race of peerless magic users lived among it, none other than the now legendary Majorat. It's unknown how, but Icthlorin convinced many of them to serve under him and fight against his enemies. They came back with him to Gilinor, and instantly the tables were turned on Zaros. his troops were sent running back with their tails between their legs, unable to best the Majorat, who became known to the Menophites as Icthlorin's stern judges. But that was until one of them enacted the first of what would be many deceitful ploys. A Majorat called Slisky defected to the Zarosian camp and convinced his brethren to follow in his footsteps. Before long, the Menophites' mightiest allies were swearing allegiance to Zaros, who once again began marching through the Caridian lands. The Menophites were quickly running out of options. Tumekin, god of the sun, decided to act and put an end to the conflict in a way eerily similar to how Zamorak would choose to decimate his own enemies thousands of years later at the end of the God Wars. He conjured what I can only describe as a magical nuclear bomb that wiped both armies off the map instantly, sacrificing himself in the process. The Zarosians would never again attempt a southern conquest, and so the war was effectively ended. However, the Menophites had paid dearly for this ostensible victory. The amount of casualties had been nothing short of apocalyptic, and it's sometimes theorized that Tumekin's last stand is what turned the peninsula into a lifeless desert, again mirroring the future creation of the wilderness. I was unable to find definitive proof that it wasn't always a desert, however. This was too much to stomach for the Menophites. They held their leader, Pharaoh Osmumten, responsible for the calamity the realm had endured, later rebelling against him and murdering the entire royal family. Only his son Mehar would survive the purge, eventually going into hiding in the secretive city of Ulek. But his is a story for another time. This is where Amaskut comes in. It's said that the war deeply changed the demi-goddess of rebirth. Some sources point to her witnessing the Majorat's power, but honestly the amount of atrocities during the Caridian-Zarosian War, who's to say what was really the main cause of the damage to her psyche? In any case, something about the war pulled Amaskut into Madness's embrace. The status quo had for a long time been that her brother Icthlorin would guide the souls of the dead until she could take over and help them be reborn. But shortly after the war, she began revolting against her role. She was no longer the goddess of rebirth. Instead, she adopted a new, ominous identity, unilaterally changing her title to the Devourer. Instead of helping the souls brought by her brother to rebirth, she began consuming them. And in the world of the living, she was no longer a protector, but instead an agent of chaos and destruction, hastening along the deaths of as many mortals as possible so she could live up to her new name and devour more souls. She made no secret of her altered priorities, openly declaring her contempt for her family and what they stood for. This complete and sudden change did not win her many favors among her old followers. Her own brother Icthlorin has since been her most bitter enemy, refusing to abandon the old Menophite values and having his job made much more difficult by Amaskut's hostile actions. Amaskut's metamorphosis became all the more evident when she began tearing down her own temples and attacking those who had been her most fervent worshippers. It did not take long before her old followers had had enough of her. Whatever good deeds she had done in the past, even a fool could see she was now going down a dark path, and few were willing to follow her through it. The followers of Amaskut rebelled against their deity. Many had already succumbed to her purges, but on one fateful day, her remaining priestesses united their forces, intending to put an end to the mayhem. Together, they were able to curse the demigoddess, confining her to a human form which limited her power, as well as preventing mortals from willingly worshipping her, severely impeding the destructive goals of the Devourer. Amaskut was furious, and unfortunately still powerful enough to retaliate in kind. She cursed the priestesses right back, forcing them to assume her own form, meaning they were doomed to wander the land as cats. Perhaps because her most bothersome nemesis were now cats, she also developed a general phobia of them. In fact, Icthlorin feared so much for the safety of felines that he gave the title of Guardian of the Feline Kind to the Sphinx, giving it extensive powers including eternal life. but tasking it with the protection of all cats against the Devourer in exchange. Ameskat's precise actions over the next several thousand years are something of a mystery, as there is very little information about her around the long and ruinous God Wars. But by the end of the Third Age, the Edicts of Guthix were in place, banishing all gods from Gielinor to prevent their direct interventions from creating more bloodshed. This is where the distinction between gods and demigods becomes important. While the edicts applied to Elidinis, they did not extend to Amaskat and Icthlorin, both of them demigods. This meant Icthlorin was now the only one left in the desert with the power to stand up against the Devourer. The current Fifth Age would see the culmination of a plan of hers that may have been in the making for a very long time, for it was no simple endeavor. Amaskat, still obsessed with consuming souls, sought to increase her power to widen the trail of chaos she left behind, and she realized there was something that could help her out greatly. Osmum X, last pharaoh of the line chosen by Tumekin himself, had been told after the end of the war to hide away the most potent weapons given to the Menophites by their gods, to prevent them ever falling into the wrong hands. The pharaoh had many of them housed in the Yaltavas pyramid, the same one where his tomb was located. Among those legendary artifacts was a creation of Tumekin himself, a pair of immensely powerful automatons he built with his own staff. One was imbued with his essence, while the other one was blessed by his wife. These were the Wardens of Tumekin and Elidinis. These powerful entities were not just mighty due to their combat abilities. Just as important was their capacity to drain and transfer the very powers of divinity between beings. This was what the Devourer was truly after, a way to break out of her weakened demigodhood state and access the momentous strength of a true goddess. However, that meant she needed sources of divine power in the first place. This is where her plan comes in. She would gather her father's 4 avatars and steal the power Tumekin had granted them, but she would need help reaching her goal. The curse put on her long ago prevented her from gaining followers she could control, but she found a loophole. She corrupted the High Priest of Scabaras, the spiritual leader of the sect of Scabaras. For centuries, she would pull the strings of the organization like a puppet master, manipulating generations of high priests and adepts to do her bidding. Under her influence, the sect abducted and forced Menapho's citizens to work for her, excavating the Yaltavas pyramid until Osmum X's tomb was unearthed, giving her access to the Wardens. And this is how the tombs of Amaskat, came to be. 4 different paths were opened up in the pyramid, each intended to act as a prison for one of Tumekin's avatars. All that was left for the Devourer to do was capture the lower pantheon her father had created. To accomplish this, she would employ subterfuge and powerful new allies, which leads us to the bosses of the tombs of Amaskat. We know their story thanks to the helpful spirit, whose real name is Aquila. When he was alive, Aquila was a Menapho scholar who fell under Amaskat's spell and helped excavate Osmumten's tomb. For some unknown reason, the Devourer's hold on his mind weakened compared to her other thralls, and he regained enough control to be able to document his experience in the pyramid, as well as the stories behind the avatars' capture. When they were no longer useful to Amaskat, he and many other workers were disposed of, and his last action in life was to pray for another opportunity to foil the Devourer's plans. Miraculously, his wish was granted, and his soul was left behind as a phantom. In this form, he is able to help adventurers get to the Wardens and slay them before their power can be used to grant Amaskat true godhood. Aquila himself isn't certain why he was allowed to remain in spirit form, but hypothesizes that Elidinis herself may have heard and answered his plight before his unfortunate death. A long time ago, even before Ameskat's corruption, there existed a group called the Children of Rebirth, composed of former warriors who had previously worshipped the minor god Het, but were now fanatically dedicated to Ameskat's older version, that of the Rebirth goddess. This group's unorthodox main tenet was that in order to enhance their future reborn forms, they had to achieve a perfect death. They one day came up with a ritual involving self-administered lethal doses of poison in the name of Amaskat. When the day of the ritual came, they performed it and called out to her. Yet by that time, Amaskat was no longer the goddess of rebirth. It was the Devourer that answered the call, only to find they had already perished from the poison, except for one warrior, Akkha, who was on death's doorstep but hadn't quite passed the threshold yet. Amaskat could have consumed his soul right then and there like so many others, but she had a better use for the dying man. Akkha was taken away and sealed in a magical sarcophagus, which trapped him in a state between life and death. The Devourer then performed her own ritual, calling out for Het. The god of health instantly sensed a trap, but felt duty-bound to rescue a man who had dedicated his former life to him. Het arrived on the scene, expecting a confrontation with Tumeken's daughter, but was instead greeted by a hostile Akkha who attacked him, believing his fate was due to Het abandoning him. While the Avatar was focused on the warrior, Amaskat seized her opportunity to capture the demigod. Akkha, motivated by his anger and desire for vengeance, was chosen as Het's guardian to prevent him from leaving his corner of the Yaltevas pyramid, remaining there until his spirit is finally freed in death when he is slain by raiding players, unaware until the very end that his fate had been engineered by his new master all along. Large swathes of the Caridian desert were long ago claimed by a populous group of baboons who thrived under the protection of their patron deity Apmeken, goddess of companionship, and the leadership of their great matriarch, the powerful Baba. As the years caught up to her, she became worried about her tribe's future. Her heir was her own daughter, whom she thought was arrogant and lazy. She desperately wanted to continue ruling the troop for as long as possible. When Amaskat caught wind of this powerful primate and her desires, she could not resist an opportunity for useful deceit. In exchange for worshipping her, the Devourer would ensure that Baba ruled over the desert baboons forever. Not seeing any alternative for her wish to come true, the matriarch accepted, instantly sealing her fate. Wasting no time, the Devourer cast one of her most powerful spells, killing Baba and her entire clan on the spot. The dead baboons were then reanimated, rising again as immortal thralls of Amaskat. With the assistance of her undead legion, the Devourer managed to overwhelm and capture Apmeken and keep her imprisoned, guarded by a troop of reanimated monkeys forever led by the leader who, in an attempt to protect them, unwittingly signed their death warrants. In ancient times, there existed in the Caridian desert a race known as the Dawn Scarabs, who possessed a great intelligence and an extremely long lifespan. While the Caridians' erosion war was in full swing, their species was violently cold by the conflict until there was only one survivor, Kephri. It's said she survived only thanks to the intervention of Scabaras himself, and so once the war was over, Kephri dedicated her life to the deity who saved her race from extinction. The Avatar being the god of isolation, this meant isolating and living in contentment by herself. But after some time, it dawned on Kephri that the extinction of her kind was still coming. She harbored a deep desire to have children of her own, so that she may pass her knowledge onto them and reignite the dying embers of the Dawn Scarabs, a desire that only grew as time passed. So overwhelming did it become that even Amaskat took note of her inner despair. Sensing another opportunity, she worked out a pact with Kephri. If she assisted the Devourer, she would be granted children even smarter than herself. Kephri would undoubtedly have been clever enough to clearly see Amasket's deceitful ways, but her desperation had reached a breaking point, clouding her judgment and pushing her right into the beckoning arms of the Devourer. No sooner had she agreed that Amasket was working on a different, distant race of scarabs, altering them to create worthy children for Kephri. Once she was done, she brought the result to Kephri, who was quick to notice something was off. Their intelligence was no more impressive than that of any common insect. True to her habits, Amasket exploited a loophole in the deal to fulfill her end of the bargain, locking Kephri in a room of the Yaltavas pyramid and damaging her mind beyond repair until she was no brighter than her new children. During these final lucid moments, Kephri used her last shreds of intelligence to beg Scabarus for help. Scabarus heard and answered the call, yet by the time he arrived, it was too late to save his disciple, and he was right where the Devourer wanted him. He was captured and became the first avatar to be imprisoned by Amasket in the tombs that today share her name, guarded by a witless creature who once worshipped him. Zebak began his life as a normal crocodile living around the river Elid. His existence was far from easy, as living in the harsh Caridian weather with limited sources of food is a struggle even at the best of times, and Zebak was not a particularly big, strong or fast crocodile. Yet he made up for it with a clever mind and resourcefulness that would have made Krondis proud. Zebak would come up with creative ways to lure his rivals into ingenious traps, allowing him to steal their food rather than having to hunt himself. Over time, this strategy proved a superior alternative, as he managed to eat more than the other crocodiles. However, his hunger grew at a rate even faster than that at which he was acquiring new food. No longer satisfied with only eating others' catches, he started devouring the victims of his traps too. As he escalated his ceaseless consumption, he became in time the biggest and strongest of the crocodiles, but his hunger still seemed to only grow alongside himself. This proved problematic after a while, as he had eaten so much that there was very little food left around him. Ever on the lookout for exploitable souls, Amasket one day noticed Zebak's situation, and she offered another one of her crafty deals to the creature. If he did her a favor, she would ensure he would never again go hungry. The rumblings of Zebak's stomach were too much to ignore, and his gluttony pushed him to accept Amasket's terms. Zebak applied her self-taught craft, creating another one of her clever traps and luring Krondis into it. When the goddess was where they wanted her, Amasket used her power and her partner's great strength to subdue and imprison her. As you've no doubt realized by now, the Devourer had made it a habit to word her seemingly fair deals so that she could exploit shady loopholes once the other party was no longer needed. However, in this case, she did not even attempt to fulfill her promise in any way. Instead of rewarding Zebak, Amasket cast a curse on the now massive creature, causing everything he ate to crumble to dust right as it entered his mouth. He quickly yearned for death to release him from the eternal hunger he was subjected to, but he was denied even that. The curse was also binding him to the world of the living. He has been forced to simmer in his agony in the sunken room leading to Krondis' prison ever since, unable to escape the torturous fate imposed by the Devourer. Of the weapons granted to the Menophites by their gods during the Caridians' Erosion War, none were greater than the Wardens, a pair of devastating automatons built by Tumekin himself. The Wardens were designed to embody the greater Menophite gods, Tumekin and Elidinis, each of them having imbued one of the automatons with their powerful essence. As such, just as Tumekin had done when he created the lesser gods of the Pantheon, his 4 avatars, the Wardens had the ability to transfer divine power between beings. This is why they were so instrumental to Amasket's plan of acquiring godhood from a source of divinity, her father's avatars. When the conflict ended, the Wardens were among the weapons hidden by Pharaoh Osmumten in his tomb in order to prevent their misuse. Amescut and her mind-controlled slaves managed to unearth them, and their destruction to foil the Devourer's plan is ostensibly the ultimate goal of the raid. Amescut's phantom is visible behind the last Warden when a party reaches the final phase of the fight, observing the battle. Should the raiders defeat their final enemy, she proceeds to consume its soul, perhaps because while the Wardens are destroyed and can no longer help fulfill her ambitions, she can at least devour their powerful essence as a small consolation prize. Beginning with Elidinis' ward, this broken ward is given to Pharaoh Osmumten by the goddess herself after her husband's sacrifice to end the Caridians' erosion war, the last thing she is known to have done before she retired from Gielinor affairs for a while to mourn her husband. Now, Pharaoh Osmumten had his own personal weapon, the eponymous Osmumten's Fang. He was renowned as an expert hunter, and he is known to have used the fang to slay many great beasts. It was buried alongside its owner, and unfortunately it's unclear if it really did once belong in the mouth of a large creature, and if so, which one. Although, as a seasoned hunter, it's possible that the pharaoh once fell a mighty foe, and did indeed loot and repurpose its vicious fang as a weapon. Then we have the raid's armor set, the Masori armor. Its name comes from those who once wore it, the Masori tribe, a desert clan once renowned for the deadly skills of its members with ranged weapons. They were widely known and beloved for their defense of the common folks against criminals preying on the vulnerable population during the chaotic and lawless days of the Zerosian invasions. Speaking of the Caridians' erosion war, after it had ended, there was a warrior and craftsman named Amek who crafted the raid's ring, the Lightbringer, and imbued it with the leftover energy from Tumeken's explosive sacrifice. His goal was to use the ring's power to assert his rule over the many small gangs of bandits and mercenaries in the Caridian desert, and use them as soldiers to overthrow the pharaoh. However, he did not make it very far into his plan, as he was murdered in his sleep the very night after the ring's creation. The Lightbringer was stolen by the killer, and later found by a Menethite god on the corpse of the bandit, who, unfortunately for him, had been caught and executed for his crimes soon after. When it became clear that the ring was an item of great power, it was offered to Pharaoh Osmumten. Then we have quite an interesting item, the Thread of Elidinis. Behind it is a legend that claims the goddess Elidinis once visited a field during a severe drought, finding it barren. She found the farmer who owned it and asked what grew in it. The farmer replied that he used to grow flax, and his wife would use it to supply all of the Menafos weavers with the highest quality flaxen thread. But thanks to the drought, there was so little fresh water to go around that none could be spared for the crops. Elidinis would leave the farm for a short time, and when she returned later, the very waters of the Elid were following her every step. As she walked through the dried-up field, the plants began to spring back to life around her, healthier than the family had ever seen them. The farmer's wife would soon after resume her work making spools of flaxen thread, and the first one she made from those blessed crops she dedicated to Elidinis. It is said that the thread on that one stool never ran out, a fact that surprised even the goddess herself. It's unknown how it came under the possession of Pharaoh Osmumten. And last but by no means least, Tumeken's shadow. It was entrusted to Osmumten by Elidinis alongside her own ward. Tragically little is known about this incredibly powerful staff, other than it being powered by the sun itself, and Tumeken having used it to create the Wardens. Definitely the only powered staff to be literally solar powered. As always, a huge thank you for watching, especially all the way to this point. These projects require a huge amount of work, and that's only made possible and motivating thanks to you guys' amazing support. Oh, and if you want to express that support, liking, commenting and subscribing is greatly helpful to the channel's growth and reach, so please consider doing it if you like my work. Oh, and also if that's the case, you might be interested to learn I've made another channel where I'd like to start publishing videos relating to anything I'm interested in, really. It'll be mainly focused on gaming probably, but not necessarily exclusively so. It's called Multi After Dusk, and if you'd like to see more of my work, definitely keep an eye out for it. It's gonna be more centered around my thoughts and interests. And while I'm still in the plugging phase, why not check out my video on the Legend of Arav? It's a tragically underrated story and honestly probably my favorite video on this channel. It deserves more love than it's gotten so far, and I'm sure you'll love it. And finally, I want to do a quick shout out to a clanmate of mine who agreed to carry me through TOA so I could get this really cool footage of the bosses. He's a real homie who makes awesome OSRS designs. You might even have seen them pop up on Reddit if you're lurking around the popular OSRS subreddits. If you'd like to rock some super cool merch like this, definitely check it out, link will be in the description. Hello, Multi from the future here. I actually reached out to this clanmate in question about this shoutout right before releasing the video, and they graciously offered to create a discount code just for you guys. So if you are interested in this merch, you can get it for 15% off with code MULTI15. Feels kind of exciting getting a discount code. This channel has come such a long way. But anyway, this outro has gone on long enough. Huge thank you once again for watching. You're a legend, remember to hydrate, and I'll see you next time.